All right, Nick, let's talk about the Atlanta Falcons. I think a real bright offseason for the Falcons. I love a lot of moves they made, guys they brought in. I think the draft picks they brought in here, I think there's a lot to like about what this team has going for them. But there's one guy in particular, I think coaches, both on, position coach, coordinator at the position as well, really, really fond of someone in particular, really liking what is going on at the Falcons OTA so far. I think Falcons fans are going to love this one. But before we get into that, I'm Andrew, that's Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, Nick, as I alluded to, one guy in particular is really impressing so far. A young rookie for the Falcons, looking really good. And no, it's not first round pick Jalen Walker. It's another defensive player. We're talking about James Pierce Jr. doing a lot of good stuff, really highlighting. Coaches love it so far. Let's get into the article, and then we'll get into some data on the other side. This, of course, from over on SI.com, and says, referring to Pierce, says, but Pierce, no matter the means, fits the bill in a way few recent Falcons have. This is position coach talking about him, says, the traits are real, Falcons outside linebacker coach Jaquez Smith told Atlanta Falcons on SI. He's fast, he's big, he's long, he has long arms and things of that nature, the things you look for from a natural rusher. Then, when Falcons defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich described the vision for Pierce, it didn't take long. They didn't take many words is what they're getting at here, is take his spot on the edge in attacking opposing quarterback. So just get him down there, put him on the edge, let him get after the quarterback. It's obviously he's excellent at the position. He has a foundation, a home there, Smith said. I think right now, the thing about him, you don't really have to manufacture a lot for him. He kind of knows the position. It's just getting him to the pro game, getting him ready for that pro level. Ulbrich said there's a lot of players whose coaches have to fabricate opportunities for them. There are other players who make things happen on their own, and that, Ulbrich said, is Pierce. I love that. I think that sounds really interesting because when you hear about guys, you hear about scheming sacks or scheming pressure or whatever the case may be to a young player to really get their confidence up, get them adjusted to the game. But what Ulbrich is saying here is he doesn't have to do that for Pierce. He can play the scheme. He can play the defense in front of him and make things happen on his own already. Ulbrich thinks Pierce is capable of doing that. I really think that's a great trait to have, and I really am excited when he said something like that about Pierce because, quite frankly, if you compare Pierce to some of the best edge rushers in this draft, that's what he did in college as well. So if it's already translating, like you said, that's the only thing, translate to the pro game. If that's what Ulbrich is already seeing, I think there's a good chance he's capable of doing that. Let's get into this chart and we can, diagnose how he was able to create pressure for himself, create sacks, create big impact plays as a player in college. And we're comparing him to some, really just low-level players here. Abdul Carter, the first edge rusher off the board here. Then Shamar Stewart as well, another really high draft pick, both first-round guys. Comparing Pierce to the other two best edge rushers in this class, you look at sacks, first of all. How many sacks do these guys have over the last two seasons? Abdul Carter, really great job, has right about 15 sacks, but Shamar Stewart, not so great. He had about 4 sacks over the last 2 seasons. You look at James Pierce, though, this guy had 21 and a half sacks over the last 2 years. Really great job for Pierce. He was very consistent at 8 and 13 and a half, I believe, doing really, really good. But let's look, maybe sometimes they just got to the quarterback. They weren't able to convert. Let's look at the hurries, what they brought to the table there. Abdul Carter, 61 hurries. Shamar Stewart, less than that, 52 hurries for him. But you look at Pierce over here, 71 hurries for Pierce. Really a great job there as well. But let's see inconsistency. Is there just a lot of volume out there? Did Pierce just get a lot of play time? Is that the reason why his numbers are so high? Let's combine sacks and hurries and see the conversion rate of when they're going off their edge, when they're getting a shot at the quarterback. How many times did they just hurry him up, and how many times did they actually make the play convert? I think this is really important here. You look at the sack conversion percentage off of hurries for Abdul Carter. Pretty decent, about 27% for Abdul Carter. For Shamar Stewart, pretty low, about 7% there for Shamar Stewart. low amount of sacks will do that for you. But you look at Pierce, 29.5%, better than everyone in every statistical category, whether it's sacks, whether it's hurries, or whether it's everything combined, what his percentage was. James Pierce Jr. looks like a really solid player. Like Ulbrich said, who can create plays for himself. He can go out and get it done. I think this is going to be a really big pickup for the Falcons. Curious what your thoughts are on this one, Nick. But before we get to you, Falcons fans, in the comment section below, I'm going to throw a hard question at you. I'm going to pitch you against two of your own draft picks. I'm really liking what we're hearing about James Pierce Jr., but I know Jalen Walker, he was your first round pick, and that's a guy who is going to be probably pretty productive in this defense as well. But who do you think will be more productive? This is your chance to get it out first in the comment section below. Who's going to be more productive this year? Is it Jalen Walker? Is it James Pierce Jr.? And maybe if you have a differing opinion, let us know why in the comment section below. But nonetheless, Nick, what are your thoughts on this latest out of Atlanta?
I can just say this duo right now of Walker and Pierce, this feels special. This feels very similar to Braden Fisk and Jared Verse last year with the Los Angeles Rams, that famous pod that McVay and co set up there on the West Coast. It seems right now in Atlanta, we got a similar thing going on here with this Falcons defense. And I love to see that, right? I love to see guys that stylistically fit each other. Because if you look at what they're getting from Pierce, they're getting a much more traditional, hyper productive defensive end. He can be a game wrecker and it can be just a big time playmaker, but he's not the absolute freak, right, that we're talking about with Walker, who just like could become legitimately unblockable, right? He just has measurables and a tool set that is off the charts. But when you talk about Pierce specifically, there's a lot to really like in terms of fit with what the Atlanta Falcons need. So obviously the Atlanta last year defensively not good at getting the quarterback to the ground. They had the second fewest sacks in the National Football League, but they actually finished top 10 in hurries in the entire National Football League. What does that mean? It means they were downright terrible at getting the quarterback actually on the ground in a sack. They got some hurries on them. They were decent in that regard, but they couldn't finish the play. They allowed a lot of what should have been second and 20s after getting a sack to become second and 10s, and what should have been, third and 20s to be third and 8s because the quarterback was able to hit the check down or throw it away before he was taken to the ground, right? It's that next element, that next step. Can you make that play? And that's exactly what James Pierce Jr. did. You showed us numbers there last season comparing him to guys like Abdul Carter. No slouch, obviously. He's just going to be a superstar. Looks like the next Micah Parsons, if you believe all the reports. But it's not just what he did last season. James Pierce Jr. actually led the SEC in sacks in 2023. So this is a guy who has had multiple seasons. He is consistently phenomenal at getting the quarterback to the ground in a sack, which is exactly what the Atlanta Falcons need. One of the problems that Atlanta has dealt with, I think, defensively over the past couple seasons is they made life really hard for themselves in terms of playing defense, getting off the field, right? They force every single play. They have to make every 3rd and 6 stop. They have to find a way to get off the field. They don't make it easy. They don't have a guy that can just get 12 sacks, that can get you in a long yardage situations, right? They've had some good players. They've had some playmakers. They've had some good cover corners, but they don't have that, to use the corner. They don't have that 8 interception guy or a defensive end that was a 12, 13, 14 potential sack guy. Now they've got it in James Pierce Jr. And I think this is going to be a huge boon to the Falcons defense. And a lot of people look at Atlanta trading back up into the first round and they laughed at them. They mocked them. So what are the Falcons doing? They're a bunch of idiots. But when you look at the fit and you look at what's going on with Atlanta right now defensively, and you look at how a lot of their games went last year, and certainly those big situations, it's not a stretch to say the Atlanta Falcons were probably 2 or 3 sacks. That's it. 2 or 3 sacks to having 2 or 3 more wins, right? You look at these close losses that they had, they make 1 or 2 more plays, they win the game. And I think James Pierce Jr. is that playmaker, right? Is he the absolutely incredible high ceiling player? No, not like a Walker. No, he's not the same kind of player. But is he hyper productive, hyper consistent, doing it against the best competition college? Absolutely. It's hard to think of a first round pick that the team traded back up to get him as a steal. But when you look at the fit and look at what the Falcons need, the immediate value that James Pierce Jr. will provide to this team, it's hard to think of a better draft pick than what the Falcons did here. And this is why, and it's an important point here, you don't grade drafts within hours after the selection. You see all the people in the media, they go, oh, this good pick, bad pick. What is this team doing? Take a step back. Let these players show up at these organizations. See what the coaches are going to do with them. See how they fit. See the strategy. And once you start to see it, things will start clicking. Like, okay, I see what they're doing here. We'll look at the data. We see what the Falcons' thought process was. Remember last year, everyone made fun of the Atlanta Falcons when they drafted Michael Penix Jr., right? And we're like, what are they doing? looking pretty smart now. Take it some time, wait for these picks to settle in, see how teams are going to use them, and then you'll see the strategy. Sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's good, and the addition of James Pierce Jr. is nothing but good so far.
Yeah, Nick, and I think the point you bring up about don't grade the draft before it happens. Don't judge the players before they hit the field here. I think that's the key here because if you look at the Falcons draft, and I'll say this now, the Falcons had very little amount of draft capital here. They had 5 picks in total that they were able to work with. If in the small concentration, I think this is probably one of the most successful drafts in all of the NFL this season. I mean, you look at Jalen Walker and Pierce, what we already talked about. We talked about Xavier Watts, what that guy brings to the table as well. A really solid player. Another safety in Billy Bowman Jr. out of Oklahoma. Not as impactful as a guy like Xavier Watts, but a decent player. Then Jack Nelson, the tackle out of Wisconsin. In the 7th round, I think that's really good value for a player of his size. He's 6 foot, 320 pounds. A guy coming from Wisconsin. They know how to breed offensive linemen out there. So I think a great draft overall for the Falcons. The concentration is tough. It's really hard to hit on things. But if I look at this draft, I see 3 players that I think are going to be contributors for the Falcons in year 1. And that's over 50% of this draft is contributors. That's pretty dang good if you ask me. So I think you're on to something here. People get on to the Falcons too much. They got on them about Michael Penix. Who looks smart now for drafting Michael Penix? You have your emergency escape plan. You don't have to bank on Kirk Cousins. You have a solid quarterback in Penix Jr. who did some good stuff. So overall, I think this Falcons team looking really nice. I love the pickup of Pierce, but they did a really good job this year overall in the draft.
And you brought up a great point. If you look at the contributors, the amount that they're going to have, you just go back to the last season and just forget the entire season. Just the last 2 weeks, if they have productive players on defense, they win those last 2 games instead of losing in overtime, and they're a playoff team, right? That's how close the Atlanta Falcons are and how good they can be. They're this close. As much as I know that can be disappointing for you Falcons fans, the reality is they are a couple third down stops away from heading to the postseason, and the additions of Walker and, of course, James Pierce Jr. will help them accomplish that goal.